All right, welcome back to the Living in Coastal Virginia, I guess, podcast, YouTube show, whatever the heck you want to call it. I have a very, I'm going to say special.
Special.
A very special guest, a good friend
let's go with that.
We met, I guess, because I moved into this house.
Yep.
You were doing a flip next door.
Yep.
And then the more, I guess, we had conversations about stuff, the more we just like, kind of like this guy. I'm going to spend some more time around him.
Yep.
And we've got to spend time around a little bit with each other's families. We're going to be doing a double date here sometime soon with the wives.
It's on the calendar.
We're leaving on Saturday to go out to San Diego to BPCon and do some bigger pockets, kind of networking, learning out there. But specifically, I kind of invited you on because the hot topic today is the housing market, and you also have experience both as an individual and then also as an investor, and you've also run a different company. Mm-hmm. So I think you have some kind of unique perspectives, and you and I also don't agree on everything.
Right.
So and I think like polite or maybe semi-polite argument is appropriate and good. And so
passive aggressive.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember you and I went out, and I'll use his first name but not last name. You and I took out Bobby to go look at houses because you were looking at helping him buy like his first investment property.
Right.
And you and I in front of him were arguing on like what the expected rents are, the neighborhood, and Bobby's like, "Oh, mom and dad are fighting."
Bobby was nervous.
Well, I mean, to be appropriately so, the first time you do something. But it's I think one of the things I really appreciate about our relationship is that we do see eye to eye on a lot.
Yeah.
And then we have a healthy enough relationship where we can go, I don't think you're right here. I think you're right here. And it comes from primarily an investor standpoint and mostly primarily a real estate agent perspective.
Yeah. Right.
So tell me, I think for the people at home, what's up? Oh, thank you, Sean. This is Steve Crabb.
That's me.
Yeah, Steve Crabb. So, Steve, you started kind of your entrepreneurial journey in like cars, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, it probably goes back further to like.
Well, give me some backstory here.
I mean, I grew up in a very entrepreneurial-minded family. Like my dad always worked for himself and stuff like that.
The cup?
Right there.
Right here?
Yep.
All right.
So like
Sean interrupted me.
Come on, Sean.
I tried to do it sneakily.
No, I mean, just
Call it out.
I like it. I think most people at home like when I talk directly to you rather than like treat like it's like the help behind the counter.
There's a giant cup in the way.
That's right. Dan, the clinking ice and the microphone. All right, sorry. Yeah.
No, so I mean, I grew up around it. I didn't even realize that, like, my dad just doing his own thing. He had a landscaping business and then ran like a retreat center and stuff like that for a while.
Did you get recruited into the landscaping business?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, as a young kid. So, I mean, like, I would be picking up sticks and weed whacking down the flowers and all that stuff as a kid. And so I would be with my dad just going from job to job. And so I don't even think I realized at the time maybe how much that influenced maybe even just the confidence of, oh, you can do your own thing and you don't have to punch a clock or stuff like that.
Or arguably just sweating.
Yeah.
Like getting outside. I mean, we both put on a little more weight than we'd like to now, but I think like I have some very vivid memories myself of like just getting out and doing manual labor.
Yeah.
You know, the reality is from like, I don't know, I don't want to advocate child labor here, but but when I was young, I was out like raking leaves and doing landscaping for my neighbors because like, you mean you'll pay me $15 to rake leaves? It only takes me 30 minutes.
Exactly.
Like, man, at 12 years old, I can make almost $3 an hour. That's crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of getting.
Probably
I was given like
but
I was given like a taste of that young. So I did the same thing. I'd have my own lawns and so I was just very familiar with just interacting with other people on my own and charging different rates for different things. And then went to college, graduated from there, and then went to grad school.
Where'd you go to college?
Pensacola.
Okay.
So
what was your degree in?
Youth ministries. It's super helpful in the real estate realm.
Oh man, no, working with people. I mean, and loving on people. That's important, man.
Yeah, I mean that's always been a part of my. I was torn. Like I didn't know.
Sorry, Sean.
I felt like a real pull towards either ministry or business, and so for those first early years of my marriage and life, like there was a lot of energy put into what direction am I pointing this ship? Where am I going with this? And so. I remember I was working at a job doing automotive restoration. So bumper blends and buffing out scratches and dents and all that stuff. So I worked for a company for 5 years, great company.
How old were you at this time?
I was 25 at that time. So it was my first kind of real job as an adult.
They're like, hey, here's what you can do with your youth ministry degree.
Exactly. They're like, you can either go, babysit some teenagers,
Yeah.
or you can, make a living. And
Sure.
so my wife had 2 more years at ODU though. So I ended up sticking with the job just so she could finish. I had plans to possibly pursue ministry in other directions. And then through a lot of soul searching and prayer and stuff like that, like I feel like God really revealed to me early on that, hey, like you're gifted in business. Like I'd always been drawn to it and always loved it. And kind of gave me the freedom to know that, hey, churches need generous business owners. Churches need people to employ people. And so it really gave me the freedom to just go full focus in on pursuing business. And
would you say you feel like your gifting is more in vision and seeing things that other people don't, or do you feel like it's administrative? Where do you think specifically that like your skill set lies?
It's not administrative, I'll tell you that much.
I kind of set that up.
Yeah, I mean,
I knew the answer.
I'm not like a cubicle guy or a paperwork guy, and I've
yeah.
had to outsource like my weaknesses to other people who are really gifted at it because I suck at the bookkeeping and all
and
these
from a
other
ministry
things.
perspective, the whole like body, right? Like you know, you're trying, if the eye's trying to do the job of the hand, we got a dysfunctional body here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I ended up getting into the business thing, and while I was still working a full-time job, I was going to the library and reading a ton of books and stuff like that. I wasn't aware of as
For
many
the people at home
podcasts
that
and
don't
stuff.
know what a library is.
Yeah, there's no.
Just kidding. Keep going.
This was kind of before though, like podcasts were a big deal. I didn't even realize there was that much and resources out
Did you
there.
have the encyclopedias growing up?
Oh yeah.
Dude, my parents were real strict for a while. They kind of loosened up, but on like TV, and I would like just pick up the A and read through aardvarks, apples, and read through things like that.
Yeah, we had like a 13-inch colored TV growing up, and it was kind of like my dad's famous saying was like, take a break and dig a ditch. So if you ever saw us sitting in front of the TV, he's just like, no, I got something for you to do.
Yeah.
So that was kind of
you're
like,
bored. Okay.
Oh, you must be bored
Yeah,
if you're
yeah.
watching television.
That's
and
funny.
So, we worked a lot growing up and stuff. And then when I was working at the automotive business and doing all that stuff, kind of discovered real estate while I was working that job. So doing a lot of reading.
What was kind of your first exposure to thinking about real estate? Do you remember?
I mean, it was younger. Like I was probably like 15.
Was it like a Robert Kiyosaki thing? Was
Donald Trump, believe it or not.
Oh, really?
Art of the Deal. Yeah, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So his book, Art of the Deal. And then I started reading, Rich Dad,
You found
Poor
that at
Dad
the library?
At the library, of all
That's
places.
hilarious.
Yeah, so I started reading through it. And then there was a couple phrases in there in the beginning of the book where he talks about the majority of wealth for common individuals has been gained through real estate.
Yeah, entrepreneurism and real estate. Yeah.
Exactly. So that was kind of like the first aha moment. And, we grew up with not a lot. So there was always kind of this maybe desire to see if there's a better way to stabilize finances and stuff like that. So I think that drove me earlier on
Interesting.
to look into real estate or look into building wealth or
So did you get into real estate first or the car business first?
car business first.
Okay, so you
Yep.
started off buffing stuff out,
Yep.
taking out dents.
Working for another company. And
Yeah.
then about 5 years in, decided to start my own business with the automotive industry as well.
Gotcha.
So we started on-site recon, which is a mobile body shop, essentially, is the easiest way to say it.
Sure. Still going today.
Yep, still going today. We got a bunch of really good guys that work for us in that company. Got a great operations manager that runs that.
Cool.
And some good partners. But during that time, I'd always kind of worked 2 or 3 jobs. So like all growing up, I'd had multiple side hustles and things like that. And then, so when I was doing the automotive though, I started researching more and more about real estate, decided to get out of debt as the first step. That was kind of like my Dave Ramsey influence on that. And then I met Robert Kiyosaki, who Dave and Robert,
Argue a little bit on how debt should be utilized.
if they had like a love child, it would be me. Like,
Okay.
I'm like the mix between the two of them.
It's funny you bring that up. I remember because I started reading probably Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad was one of the richest men in Babylon.
Yep,
Kind of going down like the normal, like, hey, how do you manage money? How do you take money care of money? How do you think about money? How do you think about work?
Yep.
And then I kind of stumbled across Dave Ramsey, and at first, the general information was there's a lot of similarities. And then I remember reading something about the differences about how Dave views debt, and then how Robert views debt. Funny enough, I ended up on Bigger Pockets forums, and I'm like reading these like pages long of forums of people going back and forth and arguing it back.
It's a heated topic.
Well, yeah, and I think
spirited, maybe. Is a better
Sure,
word.
sure. I think of as an individual, you have to kind of decide how you're going to live your life. I guess the way I kind of see it is like, if you leverage debt, you can grow quicker,
Yep.
but it's riskier.
Absolutely.
If you don't leverage debt, you're far safer, but you're limited on how quickly you can grow. And I think for me, that was kind of like, that was the basics. And that's,
I think that's a good summary of it.
sure.
Yeah.
That's kind of my superpower.
The summarizations.
Just like thinking about things way too much and going, how do I make this as dumb simple as possible? Because I'm kind of an idiot sometimes.
Ditto.
I mean, I'm self-deprecating here, but like that's always how I'm like, all right, I think I'm starting to understand both arguments here, but at the end of the day, not everybody's going to read 40 hours worth of stuff.
Yeah.
So how do I turn this into a sentence?
Yeah, I mean, it was actually, I had to put, it didn't come as quick and easy as you summarized it for me. It was like years of reading, researching. And so during those years, I was working on commission, painting bumpers and doing all that stuff. And I told my wife, I was like, all right, we got to get out of debt. Like that was our step one, our Dave Ramsey step. I was introduced to Dave Ramsey actually through the company I was working for.
Interesting.
And so like I started listening to his podcast a lot while I was driving from job to job, stuff like that. It actually, I mean, it helped me tremendously at least become more aware of how money works, what to do with money, just the whole conversation.
So what year did you do your first kind of investment property? Was it a buy and hold? Was it a flip? What was
it? Was our primary resident was our first kind of, I would call it investment. So to speak. We still have it. It's a rental now.
Meaning you just owner occupied it, didn't need work? What did you do? Okay.
So like this was in 2007.
Okay.
So I got married in 2007
timing, man.
and the market is kind of discouraging though, much to similar to what we're dealing with now. Cause like I couldn't afford anything it felt like during that season.
So when you say 2007, do you think was it after things started to dip, or was it kind of at the height?
Oh, it was at the
height.
height.
I say perfect timing. Okay, all right.
So what we got married,
it
was just going straight up, and there was no signs of it stopping, and it had been at that pace for several years.
Okay,
it felt like, man, it's becoming more and more out of reach to become a homeowner.
Think this. Just to kind of take a quick rabbit trail, this is kind of my exact point that I've been trying to make online and in some of my like Instagram and TikTok stuff, is that like very few people were looking at the data.
Right.
Very few. And most people, if you look at like, what year did the internet roll out?
Oh gosh, I don't know.
Like when, I mean,
90s.
I'll tell you
something?
my
90s something.
Right. I would argue, like, I didn't really get on the internet until like 2000, 2001 when I was a junior or senior. We were not allowed to use Wikipedia. We were not allowed, like, it was all book stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And then I didn't have a smartphone until I was several years in the military. And then I started kind of getting on the internet. And I didn't use I got married. What was that? 07?
Gotta remember this.
Same.
06. 13 May 06.
Yeah.
Almost got it. Right. And I remember going online and like I bought a Chilton's manual to fix the car. And I couldn't find the answer in the Chilton's manual. So I just kind of type in Toyota 4Runner, because I had 2000 Toyota 4Runner, rear axle, blah, blah, blah. And I found a forum. And I was like, interesting.
Yeah.
So anyway, I say that like, this collaboration of information online
it changed.
It's changed a lot of things.
Yep.
Not a lot of people were paying attention to anything besides like CNN, Fox News, these major media channels whose main job is to get money by getting eyeballs, and they sell fear and greed.
Absolutely.
And there were very few people probably singing from the rooftop saying, here's the balanced approach, here's what the data says, that type of thing.
Yeah.
That happens way, way more today.
Yeah, it was very emotional back then. Like it was I think people were they weren't looking at the data. They were making a lot of decisions based off of either fear or
greed.
Fear of missing out or greed. Yeah, there was a lot of it.
Well, I would say it's been democratized. Like I have a voice now where on like YouTube that I don't have to pay for, that YouTube says, hey, this audience wants to listen to this, or they've listened to it in the past. Let's also find other people. And it's free or it's bigger. Yeah. And so like, I just think that this idea today that we think, oh man, people in 2007 are so stupid. I'm like, not very many people knew how to analyze the market. All you knew is like, man, it just seems so unaffordable. I don't know how it's going on. Yeah. You didn't know that they were doing overbuilding. The inventory basically quadrupled over a period of time.
Yeah.
You didn't know anything about interest rates, the history
No
of
idea
interest rates.
there was a crash coming.
Right.
Nothing.
Yeah. No idea how many loans were being underwritten under 650. Right. And so I just think there's an arrogance sometimes for people online who think, oh, man, this is just the same. Everybody's idiots. I'm like,
It's not.
no, it's not the same.
Yeah, it's definitely not.
But
There's similarities. I mean, there's
Yeah,
definitely
absolutely.
parallels to 07, 08. That's when I jumped in to we bought our house in 08, 09 beginning. So there was like a slight
is this
dip.
the second investment or the first? Still
First one. So our primary we bought in 08. So
Okay.
started
you said
saving, got out of debt in 07. Still,
Okay, gotcha.
still got married, all that stuff. We
Yeah.
rented an apartment.
You said you still own it today?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rented an apartment for a year. And during that year, I was working crazy hours, stacking money.
Okay.
My wife was in school, but she was also working full time.
Do you remember what your interest rate was on the first one?
I want to say it was like 7%.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Mine was 6.375, but it was a VA loan, so it's probably.
Oh, that's probably better. Yeah. So I ended up on our first house. The first thing I could afford was I walked into a home that had no water, no electricity.
Really?
Had holes in the floor. Like you open up the bathroom door and there's just dirt
Okay.
down into the crawl space. Same with the kitchen. There was no kitchen.
Okay. So you had to do conventional loan?
I had to. Ended up actually my realtor at the time ended up doing a hard money loan to me. So we ended up buying the house.
The agent themselves did the hard.
They were investors.
Okay.
So
All
yeah,
right.
they knew the whole game, and so that was about the only way I could see myself getting into the market was to buy distressed property and put sweat equity into it.
Yeah.
And so that's what we did.
And that still works today.
Definitely does.
Yeah.
So that's a parallel that for people that are looking to jump in, it's not always glamorous. There were moments, man, at that house that I'm sitting there. I was working a full-time job. There's no electricity. I'm working off a generator at night and on weekends, trying to renovate this house with volunteers and friends, all on my own with no experience. Got the city involved to look, for permits. I wanted to do it all right.
Sure.
Got my ass handed to me from the city multiple times. It was just like a massive dogfight. It felt like. So it took me about 6 months to get this house renovated to where my family could move into it.
Okay. So originally a hard money loan, did the work. Then did you
Refied it.
moved in, refied?
Yep.
Okay. Owner occupied it. Okay. Cool.
Yep. So then we locked it into 30-year fix and stuff like that. Still on the same Dave Ramsey track. So I was trying to pay down our home as much as possible and stuff like that. Well, then this is about the time where the bottom just dropped out. So we got into our house and no joke, 6 months, 5 months later, it was like a completely different economic environment.
Okay.
So I was like, oh man, what have I done? My work the job I was working on slowed way down. Things were really tight.
Sure.
But I still felt like real estate, and I kept educating myself. And by that time, I'd found Bigger Pockets as a podcast I listened a lot to.
It arguably there is go back to the education piece. There's more information in the forums for free.
Oh my word!
Than what you had to pay for like a $10,000 course in early 2000s.
I mean, honestly, I got my master's degree in real estate essentially while working a full-time job because I worked out in Richmond.
If you didn't, you would go broke.
Yeah, exactly. But I also I literally in the morning I put a podcast. I would listen to podcasts and investment books all day. I mean, hours a day, and that was my education, and it really gave me the confidence from there to make better investments.
Okay.
With the experience of having had my butt kicked with a renovation in our primary, I was like, well, I learned a lot through that.
Sure.
So I probably wouldn't have even bought the next house if I hadn't gone through the experience of our primary.
Two questions. One is, do you have a core memory of the book that probably made the biggest impact on you?
I mean, it'd have to be Rich Dad Poor Dad. Or let me take that back. The first one I ever read that I had the aha moment wasn't probably the most influential or expansive with it, but it was called Find It, Fix It, Flip It was the name of the book that I had gotten out from the library and read.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember the name of the guy, but it was very basic stuff. It's just hey, you find a distressed house and you look for opportunities to make things prettier and nicer, and then you sell it for more money. It sounds so simple. I was like, oh, I could do that. I just did that with my house.
Sure.
And so that was kind of that was the first book, and then it was Rich Dad Poor Dad, and then it was really from there it was podcasts. Like I probably listen to 3 or 4 podcasts a day, 5 days a week.
Do you remember any of the ones that you were listening to at the time?
Yeah, I mean, Bigger Pockets was the first one.
Okay.
That was the big one. And then started listening to some stuff from like Tony Robbins, Robert Kiyosaki, Grant Cardone, you know, all the other big names that were out there during that time. And I mean, those guys honestly gave me a real gift with the education that I got for free.
Yeah. I mean, and all of them can, to a degree, be a little bit polarizing, especially Grant. But I've listened to him long enough and also heard him speak, and he can be very gruff and opinionated, but I think he genuinely has a heart to help people.
Yeah.
And maybe some of that's also shifted over time. I'm not sure, but
maybe,
but like everything that I've seen, at least in the last 5 years, for the most part, has been like he had a show there. He was doing real estate investment like analysis over and over and over again, and just having people call in, hey, what do you think about this one? And he would walk them through
the deal. Yeah.
And I remember one, he's just like, look, if you don't make this deal, I'm going to call on it. So
yeah.
Anyway, so you were listening to these guys. You did the first live-in. How long did you guys live in it before you decided to move out?
About 2 years, 2.5 years.
Yeah.
But we had started and we moved into another flip that we had purchased that we had renovated to sell, and it went under contract pretty quickly, and then it ended up falling apart because the lady's mom fell and broke her hip and she had to move to Florida. So now we were sitting in this house, and my wife and I just had she had just gotten pregnant with our third kid, and we were living in our first house, like 900 square feet, 2-bedroom, 1 bath, like really busy street, like everything you shouldn't look for in a home we had.
Or just this is the reality of
we didn't know any better. And that was, to me, that was what I could get my hands around and take down. So that's what we did.
Yeah.
But the next house we moved into was a flip also. We're still currently in that house now, actually. It's in Virginia Beach area.
Yeah, I've been to your place.
Yeah. So it's like that was
Flipper didn't do as good a job as I think he could have, but
well, no, the Flipper he cuts. I'll tell you what though, back then, like I looked at the projects I did 10 years ago, 11 years ago, 12 years ago, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I would kill someone if they tried to pull that crap on me now.
Okay, well let's go down that rabbit hole real quick. I always make like the analogy like with like kids. You would never look at like a 1-year-old who's learning how to walk and like make fun of them for how shitty they are at walking.
Yeah, exactly.
And but it's this balance between does things meeting code and doing things well, but like to compare yourself to someone who's been building homes, especially to a point where luxury homes for 40 years, would be like inappropriate to a certain degree.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, as you as a businessman kind of move forward, I'm sure that when you create a flip and put a product out in the marketplace, you're paying attention going, is mine slightly better? Is it done a little bit nicer?
That was my whole motto from starting. Like my whole thing was this is when they were giving housing credits, so they're paying people to buy houses. They're giving that $8,500 housing allowance away to people.
Was that the Obama one?
The Obama credit one.
Yeah.
So my first real flip, the one that we weren't living in, not moving into, was in Ocean View, and it was a disaster. And now everything that could have gone wrong went wrong on it. It ended up flooding.
Oh no!
There was a nor'easter that came through the day we went to close on it. So I went and checked on the house in the storm because I was so paranoid. It was my first like real deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I show up and I can't even get off the exit because it's full of water.
I bet you were freaking out.
Oh, I was freaking out.
Yeah.
But I hop out of my truck. My brother was with me, and we're wading through the water up to our waist up to this house that we're just about to go by.
Sure.
And there was water running all the way through the windows, all the way through the back of the house. I mean, it was 2 foot of water in this house.
Yeah.
Open up the door, and the refrigerator from the kitchen, I'll never forget, is floating in the living room, just floating in there. And I'm just like, this is going to be my first investment property, right? And I'm like, this is it. I had it under contract. And so I was a little devastated, but this is 2009 when banks were trying to give houses away.
Yeah, isn't that weird?
Different energy altogether.
Yeah, from I would say from like 09 to 12 was an interesting period of time. Like, I'm sure if you could go back, you're like, oh man, if I could have borrowed millions of dollars, I would have Steve, borrow more money and flip more houses, because it was literally that you would have foreclosures or short sales sitting on the market forever.
You could kind of almost like go up to the bank and name your price. Like, in other words, you'd run your numbers and you just present, hey, this is what I think it's worth. And 9 times out of 10, they were glad just to get rid of it.
Yeah, well, they
didn't care.
Yeah, I think one of the things people maybe don't understand is that banks are not in the business of owning real estate.
No.
They're in the business of writing loans.
Exactly.
And during this period of time, the other thing to understand is that from 07, 08, 09, 10, banks were going under.
Oh yeah.
Their like loss mitigation departments were completely overwhelmed. I did a little bit of short sale negotiation before I even got my real estate license. I was helping another guy who was an agent who like switched his business from like serving and getting friends and family into homes to, hey, these banks have to get rid of these things. I'm going to both help represent them, or I'm going to like basically just help short sale negotiation, that type of stuff. And there were times where I would submit a file. I would follow up probably a dozen times, never hear from them for months. Finally hear from them, and it was like, get us a BPO, which broker price opinion for those who don't know what that is. And so we would get it. We would order it. The people who were doing BPOs were so busy, it took like a month for that to get done. We'd submit the BPO, wait another 2 or 3 or 4 months. Then they would be like, no, that's too low. Submit another one. And then these banks basically had these schedules. It's like, well, I have to liquidate a certain amount. Like I have to get these things off my books. And basically it was just like a waiting game. But it was kind of this weird environment where if you were confident enough to borrow money and buy the houses, like, hey, I realize real estate is a long-term game, whatever it is, you just get with these crazy deals. Absolutely nuts deals.
Well, that's what I would tell people. Like they forget that, in 07, 08, everybody and their brother was in real estate. Long lost cousins from Timbuktu were calling you, wanting to learn how to flip houses. And they had, they saw the TV shows. There was all this energy behind that.
I think Dean Graziosi got big during that time, didn't he?
Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay.
But there's just like this kind of like this appeal to it where everyone thought I can get rich quick in this game. And
to a degree, there was some truth in that.
There was people buying houses and selling them a month later and making 30, 40 grand.
Courtyard steps and all kinds of stuff,
So that was happening pretty consistently. But what like now when people say, I would have bought everything. I'm like, no, you wouldn't have, because first of all, you've been scared shitless.
Yeah, back to that whole like the arrogance of the presence. No,
it was terrifying, man. Like I remember I had like genuine friends sit me down when I told them I was going to invest in real estate and I'm going to flip houses. And they were basically begging me not to do it because they cared for me. They were like, look, don't do this. I know people, they just lost their shirt. I know builders who've lost everything and they weren't lying about it, but there was so much fear around it that people were saying, don't do it.
There's you're familiar with it's called survivorship bias. It's a cognitive bias.
I haven't heard of that, no.
Well, I mean, once I explain it to you, you'll be like, oh yeah, I get that. So the idea would be that as humans, we have a tendency to focus only on the winners and not the losers. So survivorship bias happens all the time with like the NFL. Well, we're only paying attention to the people that made it. Right. And so we have this tendency to go, well, how many people actually pick football? I'm going to make it to the NFL, go the entire path, and then don't end up making it. It's quite a few.
A lot.
Right. And so there's a tendency that like if you see the midnight commercial or infomercial, or you hear that your buddy did it, for every one story of a success, there was probably 20, 30, 40 of failure. And
there was.
And so, they probably were,
I think they were genuinely looking out for my best interest, which I was grateful for at the time and still thankful for. But I just kept coming back to your point earlier about like the analytics of a deal and the market numbers. I just kept coming back to the numbers. I kept saying, well, the numbers aren't lying. Like if I pick this house up for 40 grand or 60 grand and I rent it for $1,000 a month, like my mortgage payments.
The 1% rule was like almost conservative.
Very. So it was just a different market back then. So it's like for that house that I went to.
Can you explain to people real quick what the 1% rule is, just so they?
Yeah, they're just. I mean, the 1% is basically just saying if you say you buy a house for $100,000, 1% of that would be your rent rate. So $1,000 a month would
not happening in a day.
I mean, if you find that deal, you're doing really good. I mean, it's not like that now. Unfortunately. But so back to the point of 09 though, when I was there looking at that house with the fridge floating in the living room, I went back to the bank and I said, guys, I was going to buy this for I had under contract for like $68,000. And I was like, but look, I need to replace the sheetrock, the HVAC, the kitchen, the flooring, and the electrical. This is all stuff I had in my reno budget anyways. I handed the bank my reno budget and I said, I want this stuff taken off the price. They deducted my full reno budget off the list price. And so I bought it. I basically got my reno for free after it had flooded.
Right.
But it was terrifying. And that's the thing. People think, oh man, you got lucky. That must be nice. I mean, I was
Well, there's no certainty on the back end that you can
no,
set
dude.
up.
I was stressed out, and this was the first time I'd ever done something like this. None of my friends had ever done this. I didn't have like some mentor walking me through it besides books and podcasts at that point.
You didn't have anybody to like call and say, hey, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I had a guy
Huevos on you
in our church who was in real estate investing. I had grabbed breakfast with him a few times, but he's not like, I wasn't calling him to go look at a deal, run the numbers on a deal, analyze it. He was more of just a voice of reason for me. Like, well, yeah, you can do it. I do it. You can do it. That was enough to let me think like, well, this guy believes that I could do this. I could probably do it.
Sure.
So I kind of like would, his name's Chuck Brinkman. I'd probably like call Chuck one of my mentors early on. Cause if anything, he just gave me the confidence to just give it a try.
Steve says thank you.
Thanks, Chuck.
Here's your camera.
Chuck, thank you.
Camera 1, 2. Camera 2.
But he was a good friend too, and he was looking out for me and my wife and our family. But it was more just like an encouraging voice towards like, yeah, you're not crazy.
Yeah,
like this can work. You know.
What would you say? So a lot of what we're kind of talking about or describing is risk tolerance.
Yeah.
So how do you feel like your risk tolerance has shifted over time?
I mean, I was pretty foolish back then. Like I've become more conservative.
Yeah. This is kind of that newbie arrogance. I can do this.
It wasn't. I don't know if it was arrogance as much as desperation. Like I was just not going to fail. Like I was going to work. No one was going to outwork me, out hustle me, and it was just like I put all the sweat equity into it. I would do it differently now, obviously.
Okay.
But early on, that's how I got started. I was taking out credit cards with 20% interest.
Sure.
To front load the reno and hoping that the house sells. And this is in 2009 when you couldn't give houses away.
You know, props to
Abby.
Props to Abby who tolerated your craziness.
I couldn't have done it without her.
Yeah.
Legitimately, she's been the best voice of reason and support on this whole journey. And I think though, her seeing us renovate our primary house as well was kind of like, well, that didn't go well, but we have a roof over our heads and it works. I think that gave her enough confidence to say, all right, Steve, go for it. You know. And
how long have you guys been married?
It's 15 years, man.
Yeah.
15.
Yeah. There's sometimes, how old were you when you got married?
27, I believe.
Okay. You're a little older.
No, 25. 27.
I have said multiple times, like at least for me, getting married young was really good for me.
Oh, same here.
Partially because I struck cold.
You and me both.
Yeah. I'm like, I was telling somebody the other day, it was like, really? How did you nail that down? Like,
yeah.
How did you, really?
No, she would support me in ways that like I would pitch my idea, and she was so patient, man. I would literally, for like a year before we could buy anything, I would sit on the couch with Zillow and I'd type in and I would just analyze deals. And I would say, hey, look at this. If I take this wall out and I do this, I would run through mock flips on the computer. I mean, dozens of them a night.
Yeah.
To the point where like my poor wife, like I'd be like, hey, Abby, what do you think about this? And she was just like, I don't want to analyze another deal.
That is my, if I can complain, that's my number one irritation with people who either one have never done investment, or they'll say things like, Dan, send me a good deal.
Oh yeah.
I'm looking at getting into investing, and they want me to do all the work.
All the legwork, yeah.
Now I don't mind helping or giving my perspective.
Sure.
Like I have a couple different spreadsheets I've used. I'm sure you have in the past, and you're probably down to a rule of thumb now, where you can kind of just analyze it really quickly. But when I have one couple that I've worked with in the past, and I would do the Loom video thing that I would do where I'd walk through and record the screen. I would go and record the screen, and I'd walk through. Here's how the spreadsheet works. Here's how you plug this information in.
Yep.
Here's how you analyze it. And I would go in each category, and here's risk averse versus more conservative, and tinker with things, explain it, and did it like 4 or 5 times. And I was like, they sent me we went out and looked at a property, and I kind of eventually had to stop working with them because at some point they would be like, well, what do you think? I'm like, well, what did you come up with on the spreadsheet? And, if you were risk averse, being a little bit risky, what would you do? They're like, well, we haven't done that.
They wouldn't even do the spreadsheet.
And I was just like, are you freaking kidding me?
Yeah.
I put legit hours of time into this person. And I'm like, I can't do it. You can't. It's a whole leading the horse to water thing. It's like they just wouldn't do the work, and it drove me absolutely crazy. And so now I've kind of gotten to the point where if I'm going to work with an investor, I don't mind them being new, but I need to see that they're going to put some work in.
Oh, absolutely.
And like do the exercises. Like,
Yeah.
like you said, like, because I've done this. I haven't done anywhere near the amount of like investing that you've done. However, I have no problem just going in, looking at it, going, okay, well, let's go to Zillow, let's go to Trulia, let's go to all these other rent. If you type in rent analyzer or estimated rent for an area, you can look at it. You can go and look at recently rented out places. You can look at places that are listed for rent, and you can come up with, I would say, 90% accuracy of what a rent is going to be.
Yeah.
And then you go in there and you plug in the spreadsheet and you go, is this return going to work out or not work out?
Right.
Nope, that doesn't. Do the next one. And like, I'm sure you said you were doing dozens a night. At some point, you got pretty efficient at it.
And they became familiar after a while. So I felt pretty confident. So when a deal came across, I'm doing it in my head now, and I'm saying, oh, that's like, there's some meat on that bone. Let's go for it.
Well, and you have like a rule of thumb where you go back to the 1% rule. Can it rent out for 1% of what you would purchase it for? That's really hard to accomplish today, especially in our area, especially if it's on the MLS.
Yeah, I mean, there's other things you can do. Obviously, there's Airbnb now.
Yeah,
let's
roll into
that's
that
another
here in a
conversation.
second. But like the idea of being able to do that very, very quickly, and you find these things on Bigger Pockets. You find them in the Fix and Flip It books. And so I just kind of come back to this, like, I just don't work with anybody who's lazy and won't do some bare minimum work.
It's just like, I think people think it's get rich quick is the real estate game, and it couldn't be
They don't
further
want to do
from
any
the
effort,
church.
though. They
The
don't want
truth,
to put,
yeah. It's a lot of work, man. And I think the bigger aspect of it, again, I think it comes down to your mental state of mind, like the mind games that can go on in your head when you're talking about putting hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line.
How many, for the people at home, just to kind of give them some context, at your peak, like in a peak year, how many houses did you done in 1 year?
Oh, man. I mean, maybe like 8 or 9 in 1 year. And some of them we would keep for ourselves.
Sure.
Flips, maybe 8 or 9, and then we might pick up several rentals as well.
Yeah. I mean, there are people out there that do 80, 100 of them.
Oh, my gosh.
Those are massive teams and tons of equity behind them. But you've kind of always been base hitting somewhere between like 5 to 12.
Yeah, somewhere in there. Yeah, since we started. But it wasn't like...
Just for people at context at home, because if you go and you look at online, you'll start to see like there are different models of running business.
Yeah.
Because the margins look a little different on the person who's doing a live and flip and doing one a year or one every other year because they're trying to avoid capital gains and they're doing all the work themselves. And the margins look different for you, and they look different for someone who's doing 100 homes per year.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm definitely not like a big fish. I wouldn't consider myself that. I've just been kind of slowly... It's been 12, 13 years now we've been investing. And so just been kind of slowly slugging along, trying to take deals down that made sense. And that happened all the way back on our first house. Like you just try to make the best decision you can at the time with the information you have.
Yeah.
And currently there's so much information out there. I feel like it's
almost overwhelming.
It can be. Yeah. Paralysis analysis and all that.
Sure.
But there's so much information out there now that...
Should my maintenance and repairs budget be 11%? Or this other guy said 14%. And this guy
if you
said
get stuck
16%.
on that stuff, you're never going to do a deal. You just like, at the end of the day, you got to shit or get off the pot. Can I say that?
No, you can. I think it's harder. I think it's harder today, to be honest, than like to get into investing is way harder than it was from, like, I would say, again, all the way from 07 to even 018. Maybe 17, 18 would have been at the time where it started getting harder and harder. But from like 2020, when it became like, man, it is really tough. Now the interest rates were low enough. I would say that because I was there was a guy, a young military guy, and we were kind of running some basic numbers. I was helping him out, kind of think through some things. And I was like, look, house hacking can work for you right now. I was like, interest rate right now, I think at the time it was like 2.375 for him to do. And I was like, you do zero out of pocket. You've got 10 grand in the bank. All this needs is a new kitchen, a new bathroom, and the floors need to be redone, and it needs paint. And I showed him another house. I was like, here's what this rented out down the street, perfect condition. I said in 2 years, and it was like I want to say it was like a $180,000-ish place that could have easily been, $250 renovated, and pretty handy guy. And I was kind of walking him through the numbers about house hacking. But right at the beginning of 2020, that's when it could have worked out. That same house today,
it's gone.
Is $300,000.
Yeah, it's gone.
And so the 1% rule is nowhere close, because rents, I think, were I had estimated at the time was like maybe high $2,200-$2,400
Sure.
a month. You're buying it at this. You actually get pretty close to the 1% rule because and the interest rates were so good.
Yeah.
For the people at home who are maybe just now kind of looking at homes, maybe you haven't bought and sold before, a house at 3.25% interest rate on a conventional loan, 5% down for $400,000. Between 3.25 to 5.25, and it's higher now.
Yeah, it's higher.
$450 a month.
It's a big difference.
$450. It makes a huge difference.
Well, then you put on top of that the inflation from just groceries, gas, life in general.
Yep.
On top of that, and it's a lot more expensive than just. That's not the only price that's going up. I guess is what I'm saying.
How are you how are you shifting your business?
Yeah, I mean, I've had to probably take a few shifts in over the years. Like I first started by flipping, so I was like, I'm gonna flip, and then I just kept that
Build up
machine
the
rolling.
cash. Okay.
And then I got this epiphany, like, man, I need to start building wealth. I need to start holding on to some of these properties.
Sure.
And it takes a lot of delayed gratification to say no to a $30,000, $40,000 check and hold on to a rental that makes $200-$300 a month at the time or something like that.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of you have to know why you're doing that because it's very tempting to just cash out and keep it rolling.
And with flipping, you have to pay. What are the kind of the general taxes?
Yeah, you got like your capital gains.
I mean,
and
you have a lot of expenses that you get to
Sure.
deduct as a real estate investor, like practitioner. At the end of the year, you're talking to a savvy accountant.
Yep.
They can take a decent amount off of your tax bill, but you still have to pay capital gains on every single one.
Everything. Yeah. I would almost just look at the numbers as like 50%. So if I was running the numbers, I was going to make 50 grand on a flip or something.
Yeah.
I just was cutting it in half and saying after taxes, realtor fees, closing cost assistance, PICRA repairs or whatever. And it was usually not that much, but just to be safe, I was usually cutting my numbers in half.
I always laughed because I was helping out a flipper for a little while, and I saw some of his books and helping him out when I was at ODU finishing up my degree, and I was watching. It was a TV show, like a TLC HGTV type thing, and they, it's TV. So what do they do? Bought for this,
Sold for this.
sold for this. They don't include realtor fees, closing costs.
no.
Like barely. They underestimate
No
the reno.
holding costs.
Yeah, this person made $120,000,
Sure
and I'm
they
like,
did.
wait a minute, I've run these numbers. They are not making $120,000, and I was like, they're probably making more like 60, and that maybe doesn't even include the taxes they have to pay on it.
Yep. Yep.
Yes.
Well, that was So I mean, I learned how to run the numbers, and I just ran them conservative. But so from flipping, I ended up shifting into the mindset of, let me try to pick up some rentals. So I would like flip a couple houses and then buy a rental and hold it, and then flip a couple more houses and take that capital and then buy a couple more rentals, and then just kept snowballing it from there.
So at your scale, from doing half a dozen to a dozen houses a year. Over the last 10 years, what have you found to be some of the most impactful little things like bulk ordering, paint, getting certain certain contractors, relationships? What would have been some of the biggest impacts to your business?
I mean, definitely your contractor is a big part of it. Like getting someone you can trust, someone who knows how to work with an investor is also a big deal.
There's the contractor.
Yeah, the contractor.
Okay.
There's different numbers, man. I mean, if you're running it for a retail individual, you're changing out windows, it could be $500 a window or something. On a flip, the numbers are different. You're looking at, you don't want to spend more than $300 on a window. So you need contractors that understand that whole dynamic of working with an investor and what his goals are. Because he knows, if you have a good relationship, he knows, hey, there's going to be another one in the pipeline, and I'm not going to hit a grand slam on every house, but I'm going to keep this relationship going.
Yeah, good, consistent business over
time. So definitely contractor was a big help. I think just being on the job site too, keeping your eyes on it, really sourcing your products well. And I was constantly shopping for the best.
Not necessarily a passive way to make income.
It's not. No, it's very active. And I just stopped at a job on my way here just to check on it and make sure the pavers match the ones we're buttoned up to, stuff like that. So you got to be hands-on, and that will help your budget.
Interesting.
So, I mean, some guys run jobs from a distance, and they can do that. I've just found for me and my personality, I actually enjoy the whole process of walking into a home and seeing what needs to happen to it, and then kind of guiding it through that journey to completion.
What's been your biggest loss, the one that hurt the most?
It might actually even be a missed deal.
Okay.
Does that count as a loss?
Well, maybe you can tell both stories. We get
I just had, I mean,
edit it out if we don't like it.
one that I keep thinking about, it happened not that long ago. I had a 8-unit apartment complex
Okay.
under contract at like 425 or something like that.
An 8-unit.
Yeah. And it was
Like 1 bedrooms
1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms.
here locally.
Ocean View. Yep.
Dang.
I know. It was a great deal.
Where in Ocean View?
You know where Kingston is or Bold Mariner? Mm-hmm. So right in that general area, East Beach,
Yeah.
but not totally East Beach yet. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Kind of on that
Where Bay Oaks
edge.
Park area is.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I had something locked under contract, and the appraisal came in, but the appraisal came in below that, believe it or not, which was wrong. I thought the appraiser was way off.
Sure.
But he came in at 400 and I'm at 425. And I told, like, the girl was, I met with her and stuff. She was super nice. And I was like, I can get up to 450. Mm-hmm. And that's probably where I would, above the appraisal. And I thought I was being pretty generous. Well, little did I know she had still, even though I was under contract with her, she was shopping it to other investors. And that someone came in at 475.
The agent was?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's smart. I mean, she's doing to be honest, she's doing the right thing by her client.
I get it. I get it. But we ended up, we were under contract, but she let we kept saying, hey, we need to sign an extension.
yeah,
and she just let it go.
I feel like I want to slap your hand and be like, Steve, bro, like, come on, man. You know better than
She
that.
would not sign the extension, so we lost that deal. So that one kind of burned me a little bit. I was
475 is what it locked it?
Yeah.
Dude.
And it's probably worth, close to $1 million now. Mm-hmm. Maybe not quite.
Well, I mean, I
somewhere
don't
in
know if
there.
I would have sold it, but an 8-unit, how much reno did it need?
I mean, each unit was just dated.
Okay.
It's your typical.
Steve.
I know, dude.
And you're in the Airbnb area.
I know.
Oh, my gosh.
I know. That one burnt me. So I still, I regret that one.
Yeah.
There's a couple other deals. Like there's
Wake up in the middle of the night. No.
There was a house on the water that I wanted for our primary that I could have bought for $525.
I remember this one.
In Allenton.
Yeah.
Man, that lot alone's worth like 1.3 now.
Okay.
And so it just like
That was like 2 or 3 years ago, wasn't it?
yeah.
Okay.
So just stupid stuff like that, like those kind of. But I got to give myself some slack. I was doing the best I could with what I had at the time, and
Sure.
Well,
the reality is if you're at capacity,
Yeah.
And tell me if I'm wrong here, but like over the last several years, I've heard a very common lament that labor has become incredibly difficult to keep consistent,
Absolutely.
or like you lose guys, or
absolutely.
him getting out of the industry. Alan Strickland was talking about this, and our other one was like, he's
a
like, I have a
problem.
guy who's like, yeah, I'm done. I'm not working anymore.
Yep.
I'm retired. And he's, oh, who's your guy that underneath you? He's like, I haven't trained anybody. Good
Yeah.
luck. I'm
Yeah.
out.
That's a real problem. Like, so yeah, currently in the industry right now, like we're getting hit by, obviously material costs have gone up, labor prices have either increased, or it's just been really difficult to find quality labor, to do stuff. And so that's been a challenge trying to flip, because it feels like a little bit like a moving target, and it's only moving up, in terms of pricing.
Sure. Yeah. And during COVID, especially with, I think lumber prices have come back down, but
A little bit, yeah.
Part of what you have to do as an investor is that you're not always, we were talking about this before we started. It's like you have the past, which is comps, right? What recently sold, then you have present, what is it listed for? And then you have to make a future projection.
Right.
Right. When the Fed lowers interest rates and everybody, it seems to be just raining gold, you're like, cool, I could probably a little bit overpay for this, no big deal.
Yep.
And I can probably make it up. Like we had one deal that we did together, and when we originally ran numbers, do you remember the numbers?
You talking Kings Lake? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I want to say we had estimated like 475, 485.
Yeah.
And we sold it for what, 535?
Yeah, there was a huge. I mean, we bought that I think right before things started to go berserk.
Yeah.
So we got lucky.
I mean, we had the way that we had structured it too was, hey, Mr. Homeowner, your house needs a lot of work.
Yeah,
It's got an active
did.
leak with kitchen cabinets falling down in the kitchen.
Yeah.
But tell you what, we'll buy your house, let you live in it. Rent. What would you do? 2 months, 3 months?
I think we
rent
did
free?
3 months. Yeah, 3
Right,
months
and then
for it.
afterwards, you can pay pretty reasonable rent until you find your next place. Now she was able to lock because I helped her find a place to live, but then we were basing our numbers off of that, and then you went and did what you normally do, which is do things properly. And that buyer was a pain in the ass.
Yeah, they were.
The buyer's agent on that was not fun to work with. at least in my
But just
opinion.
in that short amount of time, like the price increase. I think the
It went
right now
so
took like
nuts.
6 months, maybe.
Yeah.
So
we got under contract March, April. Then we listed in September.
yeah, I think that's about right.
Okay.
But just in that in that time frame, the market went kind of crazy.
Because you had said, hey, I'm about 30 days out, just run numbers. And I come back and I say, hey, it looks like 520, 525 is where we should list it. And
Yeah,
you're like, really? And you're like, I'm like, yeah, I think so. Then we had 4 offers or something along
it's
those,
pretty
5
quick.
offers.
It was insane.
Yeah, above list, no closing costs.
Yeah.
They did like inspection for info only.
That was my first
Didn't end
taste
up
of
being
the
okay.
market shifting to what it's been the last couple years.
Well, you and I had a very
I was
long.
like, whoa.
We were talking about this. It's like
crazy.
At the beginning of so let's get it a little bit more. Let's get into the market. At the beginning of 2020, months of inventory was right around between I'd say 300,000 to 600,000 in Virginia Beach. 3.5, 3.7 months of inventory.
Yep.
That's seller's market, seller's territory.
Yep.
Six is neutral. So just for people at home, 6 is neutral, right? So the way you understand months of supply, if I had to pick one metric, you and I have talked about this, if I had to pick one metric to understand what's going on in the market, I would use months of supply because it literally is supply and demand.
Yep.
It's how much is available divided by what the demand is.
Yep.
Right? So if I have 1,000 homes available for sale, and demand currently is for 200 homes per month.
Yeah.
1,000 divided by 200 is five months of supply.
Mm-hmm.
And so right around the beginning of 2020, I was like, hey, sellers, because I had some people saying, oh, I want to wait till summer. I'm like, well, to be honest with you, actually, market's better now here in January than it was in summer of last year.
It's crazy.
Right, of 19. And then you were like, hey, Dan, COVID's hitting. I was like, well, they just lowered interest rates. And you were concerned. And I was like, hey, Steve, love you, man. Here's what the data actually is saying.
That was helpful.
And you were like, well, maybe I can be a little more aggressive on this.
And I was, too. Like, I picked up... It was funny because, again, fear, I think, was playing a part still in sellers' minds.
Sure.
COVID's happening.
And
you're
an active practitioner who has been doing this for a while.
Yeah.
And to a degree, you're like, hey, man, the news is saying
I was
this.
nervous.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't want to be... You don't want to be foolish and be over leveraged and all these. So to me, like, I'm trying to be cautious from what I had learned in 08, 09 and saw a bunch of guys lose everything. Mm-hmm. And,
And you're competing against guys that do an inferior job.
Yep.
That treat their contractors poorly.
Yep.
Who are willing to cut corners.
Yeah.
And you have to compete with those people.
You do. And like for me personally, like I've always held the standard on a flip that I will not put a product on the market that I would not move my family into.
Sure.
And I have 4 kids and a wife I love. So
I think that's easy to say. I think it's really hard to execute on.
Yeah, it costs more money to do that.
Yeah, I mean, the uglier the property,
Yep.
The more likelihood that there is things that you don't see upon the initial walkthrough.
Absolutely.
And so writing offers, hey, I'll pay cash for your property, close in 2 weeks, no inspection
No
as an investor, right?
all
No
of it.
contingencies, free rent back period. There's a decent amount of risk tied up in that.
Absolutely.
But like the market in 2020, it was like, man, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
I didn't expect for it to get better.
But there was a stall. So like I think there was like a 3-month window when COVID started. 3, 4, 1. It wasn't that long
It was
of a window.
It was shorter than that, but that's fine.
But there was a short window where fear, I think, was the dominant thing
absolutely.
in people's minds of what is happening to our world, and rightfully so. I mean, we'd never seen anything like that.
When you hear, "Hey, everyone's going to die," right? You can't be around people. Don't let them in your home.
Yeah.
Do more people put their house on the market, or do less people put their house on the market?
Yeah, we didn't see much happening.
Right. I feel like sometimes I have to make these like very dumb arguments.
Yeah.
In this scenario, do more people do it, or do less people do it?
I think people forget too in those moments how real that fear can be for people too.
Yes. Yeah.
Like very tangible.
And appropriately so for
Sure.
large segment of the population.
Yeah.
Right. Especially at the beginning when we're like, I don't really know, is this really a danger? I remember my brother calling me. Some news had come out. It was before March because it was before the lockdown. And my brother calls me. He lives up in Alaska. And he's like, "Dude, do you need to come up here and like escape into the boonies with me? Because look, what's going on?"
Yeah, it was a real thing.
Because we were like Corona, bat virus, whatever. And I was like, I don't know, man. Like, my general assumption is that the news is bullshit most of the time, and that they're always trying to sell some fear or greed. So it wasn't until like they were like, "Oh, we're shutting down airports," and I was like,
Yeah.
oh no, like what is going on?
Yeah, and that was about the window that I think. So for me, during that window, I bought as much as I could because there were people just willing to sell their homes for the numbers that worked for me, and they were great numbers. So I was like, that works. I'm willing to take that risk.
Yeah.
I'm willing to make a bet on the market and these numbers that I'm analyzing.
Yeah.
And I think we'll come out ahead.
So like I think people again go back and they underestimate what it feels like in the moment.
Yeah.
Because I was kind of a similar mindset. I was like, I think I'm going to go out of business.
Yeah.
Rachel had just kind of started to commit, because I think I told you, it was like, hey, she's coming into the loan world. She was leaving her hospitality job. And to be fair, the hospitality business also really
got hit.
Like, I mean, Virginia Beach is a huge
that's-
destination market for within like 150 miles for people to do vacation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so like her previous boss, who we're still friends with, was like, maybe you got out at the right time, because right now the hotels have nobody here.
They got hit hard.
Like nobody. It got real hard. Virginia Beach market actually was one of the quickest recovering markets.
To me, that's a plug for Virginia Beach.
Yeah.
Because in the Hampton
City
Roads,
Council, anybody in government position, I'd love to have you on the podcast, talk about how that policies went, because it'd be good to talk about. We'll get back to it.
They did, but the thing I do like about the Hampton Roads area is like it is kind of a forced transient area. In other words, you have largest Navy base in the world in Norfolk, right?
It's like the second largest concentration of military in the world.
Okay, so
I could be wrong. I think San Diego's larger, but
you have all these people that are forced. They have to move in. They have to sell. Or
Norfolk International Terminal.
Exactly.
One of the largest influx of like materials and goods.
Yeah, so it's a great area, I think, to invest in, because it is very transient. There's a lot of moving pieces. Even like when the economy was being crushed back in 08, 09, and that time period, I still feel like Hampton Roads fared better than
we did. If you look at market corrections from marketplace to marketplace, and this hits on exactly what we were talking about before, is every market is different.
Yep.
So when I have people arguing with me in the comments, no, you're dumb, the market's going to crash, I'm like, maybe you're for your market, but the data right now doesn't suggest that for our market.
Yeah.
But you're right there, because we have such a huge demand. There are larger forces at play. So take like Chicago. I'm gonna totally botch this, but Chicago, when like the auto manufacturers pulled out.
You mean Chicago?
Detroit. Thank you. When you have a major industry leave, the housing market could be going great in other areas.
Yep.
But for them individually, that was devastating.
Yeah. But Hampton Roads is a lot more diverse than just military too, which is awesome.
Yep.
I mean, you've got a lot of industries and, the shipyards, and you've got a lot of things in the Hampton Roads area that I think for real estate are there's constantly people needing to rent for short terms. There's constantly people needing to move and sell. Mm-hmm. So for investing purposes, I think it's a great place to be looking.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a quote by Warren Buffett about when the stock market has taken hits throughout history, and like, Warren, your net worth went down blah, blah, blah amount %. And he's like, no, I didn't.
Yeah.
And what are you talking about? He's like, well, I didn't sell.
Right.
You lose money when you sell.
Yep, exactly.
And so that he's a big dollar cost averaging guy, where it's like, whether it's up, you buy. When it's down, you buy. You just constantly buy.
Yeah.
And then you hold on to it for a long period of time. And so housing is kind of similar to that, in that historically, I want to say it's the Case-Shiller inflation adjusted index.
Ooh, that's fancy.
I know, it makes me sound real smart here. I like to pretend. The Case-Shiller inflation adjusted index is 3.4%, if I remember correctly. Correct me down in the comments if I'm wrong. But the average over a long period of time is that real estate, in its ups and downs, has always appreciated at some percent. Yeah. Same thing with the stock market. If you look at the stock market over a period of time, the average-ish return, I think Ashton was talking about this, it's like 7 to 11%, depending on what you're invested in. Mm-hmm. And so that 7 to 11% is a bet on the American economy.
Sure.
And so if what you're doing is you're buying, improving, and selling, like if you're going to buy and sell real estate on a short-term basis and make a profit, you have to do the way you do.
You have to force that equity. Yeah, absolutely.
But if you're going to be a home owner, you have to do it over a long period of time. Historically, that's been 4 to 5 years to break even. Mm-hmm. From that was kind of the general advice that was given.
Yeah, and I think there's still the opportunity for people to make more equity on their primary residence by doing the same thing, like the live-in flips, like the house hacking. And
Yeah.
So depending on like where people are wanting to get, if they're wanting to jump into real estate investing, their primary residence is by far the simplest, easiest, and the
Probably
most
the safest.
and the safest. That's what I was going to say.
Because if you worst case, if you do a bread and butter place, we're not talking about going over leveraging.
No.
Like buying a house that's outside of your budget to in the initial part is some period.
Yes.
But if you want like the safest possible flip,
Yeah.
even in today's market, it's hey, find something that needs some work that probably people are glancing over.
Yep.
Negotiate on it if you can.
Yep.
And if the numbers don't make sense, don't pull a trigger. But if you can buy it and do it yourself, sweat equity, right?
Yep.
If you look at what a scope of work is, it's going to break it down into labor and materials. And you'll notice that whether it's putting poly under the house, putting insulation into the attic, painting, redoing a kitchen, somewhere between a third to 2/3 to 3/4 in some cases of the cost of that job is labor.
Yeah.
So if you can do the job at a somewhat equivalent, doesn't have to be as good as like a bespoke or like a real craftsman.
Sure.
But we're talking about bread and butter here. Basic tile.
Yeah, you're
basic
talking paint. You're talking just good maintenance,
Yep.
good curb appeal on your
Yep.
home, and taking good care
Some
of
basic landscaping.
Yeah.
Right. So we bought the house. We negotiated. Maybe we bought it as an owner-occupied flip, which means that we can put, if you're VA, potentially 0 down. USDA, potentially 0 down.
crazy.
If you
Yeah.
have decent credit, 3% conventional.
Yeah.
Right. If you're negotiating on a house that's been sitting, you might be able to get your closing costs covered. Okay. So even if you're not USDA or VA, 3% down.
it. Yeah.
And owner occupied. What's the latest out of the last house that you bought and sold, and are holding on to? What was the interest rate as an investor?
I mean, I have one that we're refining right now at 5.8.
That's not too bad.
It's not bad. It's on a 30-year fix. That's a
Okay.
really good one.
Yeah.
They're averaging though closer, like right now, what I'm
Six.
saying is 6.7.
Yeah.
7 in like 7.1, 7.2. If it's like a duplex or something like that, they're going to hit you with some extras.
But you have to put 20% down. Your interest rate tends to be higher.
Yep.
So if the market were to correct, which I will get into what correction means here in a second. If the market were to correct 20%, you hold on to it.
Yeah. Yeah. This is like, it's not a get rich quick, scheme. It's you buy, you improve, you hold, you make good investments.
At least in this market.
In this market. Yeah. I would say like if you have a house, and I think some people right now, people are thinking like, well, shoot, I just missed the top of the market. I just missed my opportunity to sell. I mean, maybe. I mean, it's definitely going in a different direction now. Things are slowing down.
Sure.
But the prices aren't dropping like
Yeah.
they were in 2009.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit more. Let's make it stupid simple. Okay, a correction can mean a couple different things. You have acceleration and deceleration in the housing market. For the last 2 years, we've had, depending on what marketplace you're in, 10, 15, 20% appreciation.
It's insane. Yeah.
Appreciation, right?
It's insane.
On $100,000, 20% means $120,000 for
Exactly.
basic, keeping the math stupid simple. You have one of three things that can happen. The market can go up, the market can stay the same, or the market can go down.
Yep.
That's how let's keep it stupid
That's
simple.
it.
Okay?
That's it. Those are your only
So,
choices.
depending on how you define crash, does
Yeah.
crash mean going from 20% appreciation to back down to 12? That would be an 8% less appreciation.
Right.
Or
not a crash.
let's use 10% appreciation. We had 50% less appreciation this year,
Right.
Steve. Oh my gosh, the market is crashing.
Yeah, no.
There's a book, I think it's called Lies, Damn Lies, and Statistics. And it's like, how do you like lie with using numbers? And the golly date. I understand marketing and I understand why people do it, but to a degree, it drives me batshit crazy.
Yeah.
So here's my bet. My bet is that when inventory is 1/4 of what it would be in a balanced market, even if interest rates go from 3.25% up to, let's even say 7% by the end of the year, which is very possible, you reduce the buyer pool. How
Yeah.
much so? Okay, well, we can look at mortgage loan applications,
Yeah.
and we can look at mortgage loan originations. How many loans are being written on the real estate side? As a real estate agent, you can look at settled sales. So how many homes are actually selling? And so, in a normal appreciation market, back to the Case-Shiller thing, it's 3.5%. So if we go from 20%,
Yeah.
let's just say that's the number, down to 3.5%, are there going to be a lot of hurt feelings on, that drastic reduction.
Right.
Duh.
Yeah.
Yes, but it's average.
Right.
Normal.
And you shouldn't be investing for you shouldn't be betting on appreciation. Like,
Well,
I mean,
if you read
it's
any
always
investment
kind of
book,
there,
they're
but
like,
sheesh.
go for cash flow first.
Yeah,
Appreciation is kind of the cherry on top if you can.
absolutely.
And forced appreciation is going to trump.
I mean,
regular
I
appreciation.
am running my numbers so a little bit more conservative to whereas before, like I wouldn't factor in appreciation at all. I would just say, hey, currently here's where the market is and this is where I think I can sell it today.
Yeah.
If it was fixed up, the rental might take 4 or 5 months and I reevaluate then.
Yeah.
But
You're willing to take a little more risk in that
But
environment.
now what I'm doing,
Yeah.
if I know the rental's going to take 3 or 4 months, I'm taking money off the sales price. If I was thinking I was going to sell for $250, I'm running the numbers at $240 now.
Well, we just ran numbers the other day on a property.
Yeah.
Hey, Dad, I see this one's been sitting. What do you think it'll sell for? Okay, there's comps within the last 3 months. 545, 555, maybe 560.
Yeah.
In the very competitive market. I'm gonna say, Steve, I think you run it off 535 to be safe.
Yep, exactly.
And you said 515.
I mean,
Right.
I wanted, well, I think I said like 520 or something like
Yeah,
that.
something,
We
yeah.
weren't too far off, but
Yeah.
the whole concept is like, I'm not,
And it's your money, so you
yeah,
you can
and I'm
make that,
definitely,
yeah.
I'm just definitely not planning on the appreciation to be cranking out at the same rate it has been for the last 2 years.
And
It's
if we
not-
see, let's just say we do see a correction, okay, you have to kind of go, all right, well, how long is that rental going to take? And then in the environment that I'm going to be selling, I'm probably now going to have to pay for some closing cost assistance because if I sit for 30 days and the best offer I get is one asking for the closing cost assistance,
You're gonna have to take
I
it.
have to either decide, do I reject that offer and wait on market?
yeah, I wouldn't.
Right. and do I think because if I reject it and have to wait another 30 days, what happens in the market again?
Yep.
Right. So go back to 07, 8, and 9 when the market's declining.
Yeah.
Right. You're like, well, I need to be more conservative here.
Yeah.
So like I think for the people at home, one of the things Steve and I were talking about a little off camera is I'm going to do a quick rabbit trail here. So when I was at ODU and I was doing my engineering degree, we had this like a water flow basically class that we took. And so you would have a reservoir and then you would go, hey, it's this pipe into this pipe, split into these 3 pipes. Here are the style of the pipe. Here's the fittings. Here's the angles that go. And then I would have to do this long drawn out calculation because that's what they teach you at first is like you have to understand how to do it.
The longhand, yeah.
Right. And I'm sitting there for 45 minutes figuring out how, like at the end, what's the water flow?
Yeah.
Right. And then it's this big reservoir. How long does it take? And right. And that's like the test question.
Yeah.
And then one of the things the professor I think did very intelligently was, hey, you understand that now. One, you have calculators that'll do it instantaneously.
quicker, yeah.
Or if you're out in the field, because a lot of engineering is you have like the people who design things and then you have the people that implement those designs.
Yeah.
And there's a large overlap there of understanding because my minor was in construction management. That was kind of the pipeline I was going down.
Right.
And so he would be like, all right, this I can come up to 95, 96, 97% accuracy of the exact answer you got by this rule of thumb and a factor of safety.
Yep.
And so when people argue online, well, you're not considering this, you're not considering this, you're not considering this, you and I said, at some point we have to be able to make a decision.
Yeah.
Right? And so you can analyze and analyze.
You're not going to eliminate the risk completely ever.
No, but we have to go with like, all right, what's a good rule of thumb and what are the principles?
Yep.
The principles are if you buy real estate and hold on to it
Yep.
and force appreciation, you're going to do probably okay,
Yeah, for sure.
right? If you don't have to sell, you're probably going to be okay and be able to ride it out. If you can rent it out for more than what you bought it for,
Right.
you're probably going to be okay.
And that's part of the whole process is like I would tell people if they're starting, like run your worst case scenario
Sure.
on a deal. And if you can live with it and you're still like happy about it, then do the deal.
Well, let me kind of push this point even further. This is not just freaking theoretical. This
No.
is real. Like I've had clients that I've personally helped sell their house who bought houses in 06, 07, and 8 that couldn't sell in 12 or 14 because they would have lost money.
Yep.
Okay, do you know even at 6 3/4, eventually they refied and made even less, but at 6 3/4, their rent for what their mortgage payment was either break even or slightly make some money. So what did they do? They held on to the place from 12, 14 all the way to 18, 19, and 20. Well, my neighbor, someone who when my daughter was born, bought the house in 07 because I bought in 07 too. She they held onto the property, rented it out, right? Now renters don't take care of it as good, but
Sure.
they made a little bit of money. When they sold, they still made $140,000 on their property.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have to sell.
Yeah.
So I come back to the idea of principles. The principle is buy the real estate that you can afford.
Yep.
If your budget is $2,000 a month, well, then don't go get a $3,000 mortgage, even if the mortgage company tells you that you can do it.
Yep.
You wouldn't do the same thing with a car. Just because a car, go to get the car loan, they're like, hey, you can afford this S-Class Mercedes.
Right.
Well, you'd be a moron to pull that out.
Yeah.
Right? Go get the used Corolla, my friend.
Yeah. I mean, my first house, to your point.
That's definitely going as a clip.
My first house, to your point, was I bought it and then the market dropped and I was underwater on our first home. Like, so I would say actually until just a few years ago, we broke above water what we could sell it for than what we actually originally paid for the home. Mm-hmm. I think we were all in at like $195 for this little 2-bedroom, 1-bath house, not in the best neighborhood either. Mm-hmm. So now it's probably worth $210. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But if I had sold that thing back, 5-6 years, I would have lost my shirt.
Yeah.
But I ran the worst case scenario. I was like, well, if I hold on to it, put a renter in there, I'll cash flow this amount every month. Mm-hmm. So
Pay
it's a
some
long
mortgage down.
Yeah, it's a long game.
I get to write off some taxes.
Yeah, it's a long game. It's not just, but you do want to look at all the things, and it's different for everybody. Different people have different goals, different objectives that they're trying to get. And so maybe someone wants to have a rental that they can use as a short term. Maybe hey, I'm going to buy in Florida, although might not be a good idea right now.
Well, that's a really good point. I think that's an excellent point. I've suggested to 2 or 3 of my clients where they they were running numbers on fix and flips or stuff that came up. And they would run the numbers and like, man, it's just the numbers aren't very good, Dan. I'm like, yeah, I get it. Why don't you consider Tennessee? Or why don't you look at Texas? Or why don't you look at Florida? Or why don't you look at these other markets? People don't, they're far more wary to invest in a place that they can't physically be. But like I'm looking at, I pay a lot of attention to the investor forums. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I'm listening to a guy who's like, yeah, in Tennessee, in this area that we're at, I think it was Chattanooga at the time. It's like, well, the numbers are actually looking really good. We can still get 1% rule, if not slightly better in this one town. And so they were putting all their time and effort and energy into that town. Yeah. And so like the reality is right now in Hampton Roads, there's still deals to be had.
Oh, sure.
There's still deals to even be had on the MLS.
Absolutely.
But they are just not nearly as frequent. And so, hey, maybe you got to look at another marketplace.
Right.
But if you're looking at a place that you have to live, well, buy a reasonable place. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
At least that's my advice.
And people you also got to be careful too, because people get stuck on numbers. Like perfect example with the house that we just picked up on Burley Avenue, you and I.
Okay.
So we went and looked at that house as an investment property, as a rental for Bobby. Mm-hmm. And Bobby passed on it. And I kept looking at the numbers and I'm like, man, this thing makes sense in a couple different directions. And so
there were some things on that property I think scared a lot of people.
Oh, sure. I mean, it needed a reno. It needed some love.
The kitchen ceiling looked like it was going to
it was caving
collapse.
in. Yeah. I mean, so...
How hard did you have to push on that before it did fall down?
The scary part was not hard.
Okay.
I literally
and he'd been renting there for what, like 5 years?
Yeah.
That's wild.
I kind of just stepped on it and the whole ceiling...
Well, that's terrifying.
Collapsed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was... Okay, so that could be a little...
risk that you're taking as an investor, putting a renter in there and leaving that?
Oh, my gosh. Not a good idea.
Yeah. Lawsuit city.
I mean, so we waited till that guy moved out, then we went in and renovated it. But I remember there was a point in the negotiations that my number was 140. I wanted to pick it up for 140, and that was my number.
What would we get it for 150 something?
No, it was 143.
Okay.
We got them. They were at 150 or 165. We got them down to 150. I was trying to get it for 140. They came back at 143, and I almost pushed back and said, no, I want it for 140.
Oh, I remember.
And I remember thinking, like, this is just my ego talking. Because $3,000, give or take, over the course of 10 years, 20 years of me holding this asset is not going to matter.
What are you renting that place out for now?
So we actually renovated it and turned it into a
long-term,
monthly Airbnb, so like an executive rental, and it's renting for $3,500 a month. So...
Well, all right. So let's get a little into this. I think you had mentioned earlier.
But if I had got stuck on that number of 140, I would have lost the deal over $3,000. Stupid.
Yeah, I agree.
But people do that all the time.
And that $3,000 has been financed now. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so it's not $3,000. It's
no.
Yeah. So you had mentioned earlier, you were talking about, oh yeah, you can still make the deals work by doing this. So let's get into what you've been kind of doing over the last couple of years, which is a little bit of Airbnb, a little bit of long-term rentals. What of your portfolio now is that?
I mean, it's not quite 50-50. It's probably 30%, 40% is Airbnbs, and then the rest of them are annuals.
And it still makes sense for you, even though Airbnb, you have to do turnover and like this time and energy.
So, I mean, well, thankfully for me, my wife jumped in and helped. We got to this point where all 4 of our kids were finally...
Know who your wife is.
Oh, geez, Siri. That's funny. That's good. Okay.
All right, Siri,
Thanks,
revealing
Siri.
the truth over here.
But we got to the point where all 4 kids were in school, going to school now. And so my wife and I sat down and said, well, what do you want to do? Like, what excites you? Do you want to get a job somewhere? Do you want to, like, what do
Does
you
she
want to do
enjoy
with
the
this?
decorating piece? Is that part of it?
Yeah, and she's really gifted at it. And so
I've seen, she's good at it. She's
better
real
than
good.
me.
That's
Which
not
doesn't say much.
Yeah.
But so I was like, well, she came up with the idea of like, well, I wouldn't mind running an Airbnb, because we had stayed at a bunch at that point and enjoyed that whole experience. And so we had a duplex at the time that I was like, you know what? We were just finishing it up, doing a really good job on the reno. And it's like, this could easily be an Airbnb. So we ended up listing one of the 2 units on Airbnb, and then the other unit we rented out as an annual yearly lease. So the downstairs one we rented at like $1,200 a month.
Okay.
And then the upstairs, though, we ran it at the end of the year, and it was like we were renting the upstairs for like $3,300 a month. Same exact building, same exact everything.
Did you get there immediately, or did you like rent it for 1 month at like $2,800 and it like filled up, and then rented it out $2,900 and then it filled up?
I mean, it was kind of like an epiphany moment when we listed it on Airbnb, and within 24 hours, it was booked for 6 months. So I just was like blown away by this.
That's not an exaggeration.
No, 6 months. It was a government contractor. So we had a guy who had to be in town to take a course or do some contracting work with the government. He was from, I don't even know where he's from. He was way out of town. I think Connecticut.
Okay.
So he ended up being there for 6 months.
And you didn't list it anywhere but Airbnb?
Only on Airbnb.
How freaking wild. Wow.
The Airbnb platform right now is insane. There's a huge deficit of homes on that platform compared to the demand.
If someone's considering doing, like, let's say they're looking at our area and going, ooh, that's a vacation market, I want to get an Airbnb, what have you found to be like is Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, are they friendly to that, or are they kind of like, get the hell out of here with the hotel associations?
Sure you understand.
Come on, what is going, hold on a second.
Siri's trying to get into this.
No, it's not. I would not call Hampton Roads super Airbnb friendly.
Okay.
And I think a lot of that, especially like Virginia Beach oceanfront, they just outlawed any new Airbnb. So you either have to be grandfathered in, or there's a very narrow areas like Sandbridge and some other areas that are allowed as Airbnb.
Norfolk has their little corridor there.
Norfolk just changed all their stuff not that long ago.
Again.
Well, it was like, I'm saying a couple years ago.
Okay, gotcha.
So yeah,
All right.
they changed all their stuff where used to be the short-term rentals kind of anywhere you wanted, ocean view, all that stuff. Well, now they've condensed the locations for that considerably. Hampton, I think, is still a little bit more friendly towards that Airbnb platform.
You have anything in Williamsburg?
No, I don't.
Okay.
No, nothing in Williamsburg.
Mostly Norfolk, Virginia Beach.
Yeah, I got Chesapeake, Virginia Beach, Norfolk. I don't do
Okay.
Portsmouth.
And that,
yet.
for the people at home, that is, the limitation is on less than 30 days.
Yes.
So the kind of the secret sauce, if you will, right now is the corporate rental, for pre-furnished rental for month to month.
Yeah, because I mean, what happens? The city now has these programs. Well, they can type, like they can get on the Airbnb platform and see if you're doing short-term rentals or not. And what will happen is they'll show up. This is what happened to me. Show up at your door with like a summons for court and a good old $4,500 fine, and they tell you can't do this anymore, and you can go through the whole appeals process. But they're really not budging now because of their new maps that they use for it. So makes it tough.
I mean, if you were a betting man, how long do you think it's before, is it 10 years, is it 20 years, because like Sandbridge is a really good example. That market has been vacation market for forever. Right? So you have enough homeowners that are like, oh, you're going to remove that? Like, that takes away 50-60% of the use.
Yeah.
What you have is like, I remember I hopped on, I think I sent it into the group chat with you and John. I was like, here's the, I think it's Croatan.
Yeah.
Is that how it's pronounced? Croatan?
Croatan. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure someone's going to
say something.
roast me on that one.
Yeah.
I do it so often. I think like I have this like every now and then this like little minor speech impediment / like dyslexias, and like people will just
They love it.
They
Gets
don't
them
love it.
excited.
They're mean about
Trolls
it.
come out.
Yeah, they're mean about it.
Alien.
But I remember I jumped into the what's it called, like the Civic League or the neighborhood like association, and I go in there because a lot of them keep their minutes, and I'm like reading through the minutes.
Yep.
And they're actively heavily fighting Airbnb.
Oh yeah.
What was interesting is you can see like some people are like, dude, this is my second house. I'd love to be able to rent it out. And then there are other people who are like, I live in the neighborhood. This is gonna ruin the neighborhood.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
I'm like, all right, Billy.
But I kind of think like North End and Virginia Beach, they definitely don't love the idea of Airbnbs, parties. And now obviously you can't control everybody who rents your units. You try to vet them as best you can and make sure.
Sure.
But there's some people that are scared of it.
I think it's the pressure over time is going to be more pro than against.
I agree.
And so it's going to, take anything culturally, and this has to do with almost any topic, right? And it's going to change over time.
Oh, yeah.
And I just see the waves of change will come. I don't know how fast it will happen, but I guarantee you.
Yeah.
I can't say guarantee. I have a very strong inclination that in 10 years, 15, 20, it's going to be very different.
Well, yeah. And I don't like the fact that a city can tell me who and when and how long I can rent like a universal HOA, so to speak. Like, I do not like that at all.
Property.
Yeah, it's my house. I want to be able to rent it and maximize the use of it for my benefit.
Yeah, if you're considering this, doing type of Airbnb stuff, the other thing I would say be very careful with is reading your condo associations.
Yeah, most condos won't even.
There are some that are out there.
But
speaking of which, I heard a story of this gal. It was like an Airbnb style podcast, and they got around it. You know how?
I'm not sure.
If you had to guess.
Arbitrage.
They bought every unit.
Oh, that would work.
So they became the board.
So there was no rental cap.
It was
on the
like
building.
You know how like in Ocean View there are like 4 units all the way up to like 20.
Yeah.
So it was like I think she said it was like a 16 or 20 unit, and they went in there and methodically over 2 years bought every single one of them because they ran the numbers and they're like, this thing would slay.
Yeah.
So they would buy it, put in a yearly lease, buy the next one, put in a yearly lease, buy the next one, put in a yearly lease. I think she said the last 3 or 4 units kind of caught on and they had to pay above market price, but it was still worthwhile because they went in there. Now they know every unit. They are the board and every year at the rules.
The challenge with like condos is like if it's over, a lot of times you can't get financing for those if it's over a certain percentage of renters versus owner occupieds.
Yeah, I think
it's like
51%. They had like an investment fund.
Okay, so that's different. But if you're trying to finance one of these units and like go conventional financing on a condo and you think you're going to Airbnb it, I'd be very careful on the.
For them, it was,
very careful.
If I remember correctly, she said that the difference between a monthly lease and Airbnb was like nearly 5 times.
Wow. Shoot, that's
crazy.
Yeah.
Take your monthly rental, right, that you're talking about. And if it wasn't a corporate rental, what could you rent it out per month?
So we own the house 2 doors down from it, same square footage, everything, same bedroom count, and we have that one currently on a year lease at 14.
Okay, so 14 to 3,500. Now, granted, you have to pay. There's a little more cost.
Yeah, you got cable, you got the internet, you've got electricity, you have water, you have different things. I do lawn care services and all those type of things.
1,400 to 3,500.
Still quite a bit of a spread.
Right. I think for her, she said it was like 4 to 5 times the difference. And so I was like, yeah, we can overpay for this. This works.
I wouldn't tell people like, so when I'm looking at an investment, I'm trying to see how many exit strategies there are to it as well. So it's like,
the safer.
I'm looking at how much money does it make as a flip if I just want to unload this? How much money does it make as a wholesale? Can I wholesale this? How much money would it make as a yearly rental, monthly rental, short-term rental?
Yep.
So those are kind of the filters you run it through, and you see if there's options on those. And
if you're tapped out on time, you might not have time for Airbnb.
Exactly. So thankfully for me, my wife is helped with all the communication with the clients and stuff.
Sure.
But what we found was with the monthly, people aren't as picky. They're not as needy because they're just kind of there for a while. They kind of take ownership of the home.
Yeah, it's almost like a long-term hotel.
Is exactly what it is.
Yeah.
So we found like really good luck with that. It's a lot less work and it makes a lot more money. So it's been kind of an epiphany for us in the last few years.
Yeah.
So I think our first Airbnb was 2 years ago. And I think now it might have been 2.5, 3 years ago.
Okay.
And we're somewhere around like a dozen of them now.
Let's wrap up the conversation with what do you feel like your next few steps are? And maybe BPCon, one of the things we talked about was like, we're going to go in here and listen to what people are doing and kind of see what the next steps are. So two things. What are you hoping to get out of Bigger Pockets conference? And then what do you feel like is kind of your next few steps?
I mean, Bigger Pockets, I've never been to a real estate conference, so for me it's I'm excited about just even hanging with you guys and networking with other people. So I'm hoping that the networking aspect of that is going to be valuable for years to come. A lot of the speakers and stuff, like I feel like I could probably just listen to them on the podcast after they release the recorded sessions anyways, right? But for me, it's more about the experience and about like finding people that I can trust to do life with and do business with. So I'm excited about those aspects from that. And I know it's kind of a vague answer.
No, I think that's really important. I was just telling somebody the other day, speaking of the people doing business with, is that for better or for worse, I am a character person over details person. Which sometimes burns you because if someone takes advantage of you, they can take advantage of you. But I'd rather go, you know what, I've gone to dinner with this person, I've hung out with their families. They seem solid. And I'd rather do that than go, hey, there's this really awesome opportunity. I have to go through the entire document and contract and feel like, I don't know if I trust this person or not. I have to go nitpick it.
Yeah, trust is a big part of it. So building trust, and I think when you build trust, you build speed.
Well, that's part of the reason, we've talked a lot about this. Speed of Trust is actually one of the books I think we had talked about a little bit, is one of the reasons I think you and I have continued to do business is simply because of that. When we did our first deal together and you were like, hey, what do you want out of this? And I was like, what do you want? I trust you. And you're like, no, like, you need to do this. I was like, you know what? Here's this deal. If it makes sense, pay me out. If not, then don't. And it was like deal after deal after deal that we've done together where it's like, I know that you're looking at how do I make this mutually beneficial.
Sure.
I'm doing kind of the same. Push come to shove, I'm going to probably go, you know what? I'm going to take care of my boy and just get it on the next one.
Yeah.
Because when you have this like limited mindset of scarcity, it just creates an ugly environment.
No, you don't want, and you don't really want to work with people that have that scarcity mindset.
Or I'm going to get one over on somebody.
Yeah.
When I have the opportunity.
That's just such a short-lived way of doing business and life. So there's no shelf life on that. You burn one or two people, you're out of the game. Do you know what I mean? Like,
it's a reputation thing.
It's a reputation thing. Yeah. So for Bigger Pockets, I'm excited about that aspect. And then I have been like looking into the future. I would love to add a couple apartment buildings, and then also we're trying to put some energy into even starting like a wholesaling business, lead generation and stuff like that. So I can even offer opportunities to other guys who are looking to invest and things like that as well.
Yeah, kind of scale it out and figure out what you're really good at and stay in that role.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, interesting.
So that's what I'm hoping to get from it. But I'm hoping to get stuff from wholesale, but more so just the networking and the relationship aspect for sure.
Anything you wanted to talk about we didn't talk about?
Sheesh.
Question I should have asked.
No, man, I think we covered it.
All right, well, if you want to hear from Steve again or hear us talk about something specifically, feel free to let us know down in the comments. I think we'll call it a wrap.
Works for me. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it, buddy.